You've tuned in to T.C. McCarthy, the most handsome and entertaining science fiction author on video. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. Remember, buy my book, pre-order it now. It's coming out in July of 2019, but that doesn't mean you can't order it now, and it'll help me a lot when it comes time to things like bestsellers lists and those sorts of stuff. I put a video here, pew, pew, pew. So go ahead and take a look at that and explains why it's so important to me. Now, I'm getting a lot of echo here today in my quote-unquote studio because I've moved some furniture out and around, and so basically I'm doing this from an empty room, so if there's a lot of kind of, if it sounds a little bit worse than normal, then I apologize. What are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about Ebola, quite possibly one of the scariest viruses known to mankind, the subject of movies like Outbreak. Outbreak was a ridiculous movie, however. It's more science fiction than it is fact. And I think better than Outbreak, it wasn't a movie, but it was a book. If you really want to learn about Ebola, I highly recommend this book. I'll put a picture of it here, The Hot Zone. This is a book that was based on, in fact, it gives kind of a historical account of an Ebola outbreak that happened here in the United States. Ebola Reston was the variety of Ebola that broke out, and it was in Reston, Virginia. That's why they called it Ebola Reston, and it's a book that basically gave Bill Clinton nightmares back in the day. So definitely worth reading, definitely worth checking out. Very chilling, very exciting if you like kind of fact-based mysteries that involve, an outbreak of a potentially deadly virus. It's very, very chilling. Well, Ebola has broken out again. We've had a few outbreaks in Africa over the last few years, and it's back again. Democratic Republic of Congo, I think, is where the latest one is. And as last numbers I looked at, I think 785 people had been infected over the last few months. Now, there are strains of Ebola that in the past have had lethalities of well over 50%, reaching as high as almost 90%, I think. I'm working from memory, so I may have those numbers incorrect, but very, very deadly. But in the past, one of the reasons why those strains were maybe as deadly as they were was because back then when this stuff first started breaking out, we didn't have the medical facilities or knowledge or treatment regimens that are available today. So this latest outbreak of Ebola, thankfully, it's still bad, don't get me wrong. Thankfully though, its lethality is it's hovering at about 50%. So definitely not nearly as deadly as some of the previous outbreaks of Ebola in Africa. So unfortunately what that means is of the 700 to 800 people who've been infected, almost 500 of them have died. So this is definitely a very dangerous disease that has a lot of people very, very nervous. Right now it's in the Congo, but they're worried that it could cross over into neighboring countries like Uganda. So how does Ebola work? Well, Ebola basically, it acts like any other virus does, and the basic mechanism is it invades your body through a break in the skin. It's basically transmitted by bodily fluids, blood, that sort of stuff. And it gets into your skin through a break in your skin or some other route, eyes, in your mouth, whatever. And from there, it basically starts to hijack your own cells. And what happens is that this virus has something called RNA, which is similar to DNA. Basically, it contains the plan for the replication of the virus. The Ebola virus, injects this RNA into your cells mechanisms for producing things like proteins, etc., and begins hijacking your cells to produce copies of itself. Once it reaches a certain saturation of Ebola virus inside the cell bursts, dies, and releases all of its viral particles to infect other cells, and you get this rapid, I don't know if it's a geometric progression or a exponential progression, but you get a very rapid progression of illness where one cell after another becomes infected, bursts, and dies. Now, the result of this, one of the side effects of Ebola virus is it tends to go after things like your liver first, and what happens as it produces copies of itself, it also damages the cell's ability to cohere, or kind of the cohesion between cells becomes effective. So instead of making some sort of cellular matrix that has some rigidity to it, the cells themselves begin to lose the ability to grasp onto their neighbors, and things start slipping and sliding around. And so as more and more of your liver cells or other organs, as more of those cells get infected and start to burst, you start to get leaking, you start to get hemorrhaging, and so you'll see things like bleeding out of certain orifices of the body. Your liver cells will start to bleed. It just gets really nasty. That's why they call it a hemorrhagic fever. The other thing, because it targets the liver first, the liver is basically your body's ability, it's the organ that gives your body the ability to clear out toxins. And so Ebola goes after that, and then part of the immune system, and basically it's destroying your ability to fight it from the inside. So it's a very, very nasty kind of progression. Symptoms include you start off with like a fever or a headache. It'll feel like you have the flu at first. Then you start to vomit and have diarrhea. And then as things progress farther and farther, you'll start to get internal bleeding and bleeding from a number of different places, and it just becomes really, really scary. So probably one of the biggest ways that people die is from things like dehydration. As your body starts to bleed out from cells and organs, you'll lose electrolytes, you'll lose fluids. You really need to really be under a doctor's care if you want to have any hope of surviving. Now, part of the problem in the Congo with this outbreak is that there's a lot of political instability. So it's very difficult for World Health Organization members or native physicians to kind of get a lot of help from the government, the kind of help that they need, and that's complicating things. The other things, as I mentioned earlier, people are starting to run. They're running out of the Congo and into neighboring Uganda, and the worry is that someone's going to carry this with them, and then we're going to start to see the spread of the virus throughout Africa, and maybe like we saw in an earlier event to Europe or even the United States. And then there's always this problem of education in Africa. People who live there don't fundamentally understand how this virus works. There are traditions among some Africans regarding how to bury the dead, which involve bodily contact. And then there are superstitions that the aid workers themselves are the ones spreading the virus. So all of these things are complicating things on the ground for aid workers, and it's really making it difficult to stop the spread. Now, one of the good bits of news is that we do have an Ebola vaccine, and that has been administered, and it looks like it has a 90% effectiveness rate. So if that's the case, then that vaccine really shows a lot of promise. But for now, things are difficult and people are continuing to get infected and die. And so basically the verdict so far in this outbreak is I think we need to watch it very carefully, because officials are basically saying this is far from contained. The economic instability, the political instability, and the immigration and refugee status or situation in neighboring countries from DRC is making things very, very precarious. And we're not at all sure at this point that the virus is anywhere close to being contained. That's it. That's all I have for now. This has been a very kind of somber episode and very scary in some ways. I hope that the people of Uganda recover from this and that they contain the outbreak soon and that it doesn't spread. But again, thanks for watching this. Buy my book, Tyger Burning, available July of 2019, end transmission. Hey, TC McCarthy here, the most eclectic and entertaining science fiction author on YouTube, maybe even the internet. Thanks for watching this video. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. As usual, buy my books. I've got a new one coming out in July, and I'll have a giveaway coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. Appreciate you subscribing to my channel, and please, 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 please don't forget to click that little bell icon so that whenever I upload new content, you get notified. Thanks again. See you soon.